complete loss. So,
What you got to give us first?
Joe.
These are friends and mates. My buddy Ryan, who I fish tournaments with.
Throw him out the crowd. Throw him out the crowd.
He started this company a few years back, and I believe he actually sold the company to Greg Gutierrez now. So it's Greg Gutierrez's company. Ryan's going to school, so he's up in college doing that thing, and a little bit too much work for him. I'm not huge into throwing Alabama rigs. I mean, I've thrown them, I've caught fish on them, I've done well throwing them. I like them for a search bait. I throw them a lot for search bait. I don't throw them a lot in the tournament, but I do throw them a lot for a search bait because a lot of the fish that I seem to catch on Alabama rig are the same fish that I end up catching on a swim bait. And it's really hard to go through an area and pre-fish an area with a swim bait when you have to reel it in, so friggin' slow. It's just, you can't go through an area and pre-fish as fast as you can with an Alabama rig. So this allows you to cover a lot more water. I found for me I can cover a ton more water in practice. He throws a 7-prong, which you basically in California you're only allowed to have, three hooks on it.
What's wrong with you, Benny?
No, it's
Oh man, it's not gonna swim straight.
Yeah.
Joe Everett's new favorite bait right there. Only in Alabama.
Yeah. That's about, how you set it up. You put your teasers up here, you get little, split rings with screw locks on them. Kitex, most guys are throwing. You can throw really whatever you want. On the baits on the back, big Kitex. Ryan also throws a chatterbait on it, so he'll have one tied on without any vibrating bait on it, and then one tied on with a chatterbait. And it makes a huge difference. You can fish through an area and throw this bait 100 times, catch a fish, catch 2 fish, and then keep throwing, not catch anything. Pick up one with the chatterbait on, it'll stick like 2 fish. So if you're on a school fish, they like to see different variations of the bait rig. I've gone as far as throwing like lipless crankbaits and stuff on them. What also works good is throwing little spin tricks, like a little blade on it. Something that fish can key in on. Because the last thing you want them is hitting all these baits up here without any kind of hooks on them or anything like that. They're cool baits though. I mean, Ryan's into throwing them. He usually throws them most of the tournament. I'll usually throw something else. But we caught out of our 15 fish up there at Clearlake, our big fish the first day came on a rig, and then maybe 1 or 2 of the other fish came on a rig. The other bait we're throwing, which I ended up getting this bait for a search bait. I had no intentions of ever putting hooks on this bait and throwing it. It's a 12-inch osprey, and it's freaking hard to hook fish, and it's hard to cast. I throw it on a jumbo swim bait rod from iRod. It's literally the only rod you can throw it on. I know Dobbins makes some big swim bait rods, but they're 8, 6, and 9 feet. You can't throw them in tournaments, or most of the tournaments you can't throw them on. So this rod's 7.9. It's literally, you hear guys say it's a broomstick, but I guarantee you guys, if you come up and pick this thing up, it's like for halibut fishing or something. It's literally doesn't have any bend at all in it. It's hard to keep fish pegged when you hook them too, because there's just no bend in the rod. But it's just one of those things you have to throw it. It makes throwing this bait feel like throwing a bass tricks. You could actually put a Huddleston on this rod after throwing this bait all day. It feels like you're throwing a crankbait. It just doesn't feel like anything. But this big 12-inch bait, I'll run 3 stinger hooks on the bottom. I started throwing it as a search bait on the Delta to find bedding fish, which it works great for. I've thrown it at Folsom to find schools of fish. The last thing you want to do in practice when you go out and fish like a clear water reservoir is throw the swim bait that you're actually going to be throwing in the tournament. So if I'm planning on throwing like a HUD or a big jointed wave bait in the tournament, the last thing I want to do is throw that bait in there on school fish on a clear, bright, sunny day when they eat it or follow it into the boat and see you, and then they're not completely stupid, the big fish, so I like to throw this as a search bait. But then I found out, they actually eat the thing, so I've actually caught big fish at Berryessa on this thing, and just a ton of fish at Clearlake on this thing. And not too many guys throw this big 12-inch bait, so I'm a huge believer when throwing swim baits, if you have something that not everybody else is throwing, that not everybody else, the fish hasn't seen a million times, I'm a huge believer in having something just completely different. So I'm always like buying weird looking swim baits off of eBay and whatnot, just to have something different than everybody else is throwing. But the really hard bait to hook fish on. I was up at Clearlake, I think it was on day 2, we pulled up on one of our spots. I throw this thing out, and I'm reel it in. I literally have one eat it, hold on to it, and I set the hook, and I'm reeling him in. I'm like, I got him, get the net, and then he comes off. And another one eats it. I'm like, I got him, and then it comes off. And then freaking another one eats it. And I'm like, I got him. And then finally I get the fish in the boat. But it's just so hard to hook fish, even if they eat the damn thing, because it's so hard to pull this big hunk of rubber out of a fish's mouth. And that's I mean, if they hold on to this thing, you cannot pull this fish out, or this bait out of a fish's mouth. It's really tough.
Do you load it up with?
Oh yeah, I'll lube. I mean after that happened, I immediately to the tackle store, hot sauce all over this damn thing, and it's still tough to pull it out of your mouth with the hot sauce all over it. And I'm talking, I mean, and then it makes it even harder to cast the thing because you get the hot sauce on your hand, and you're trying to throw this heavy bait, and your hand slips. So it's like you're constantly putting hot sauce on, drying your hands off, trying to keep everything, nice and dry and clean. But yeah, it's just a freaking awesome bait. I love this. I mean, I use it to find so many fish. It's just awesome search bait. But you can catch fish on it too. The other thing, everybody in here know about the jointed wave baits, S-wave type baits. Everybody's throwing them now. S-waves, great bait. You can catch fish literally every lake in California on it. I haven't been to a lake where I haven't been able to catch a big fish on an S-wave. Up at Clearlake, that's kind of where the whole craze started as far as the S-wave. Guys started throwing them up at Clearlake. And then now it comes back to just having something different, they've seen so many S-waves, they've seen so many of these popular jointed baits that having a different color or a different action, just that little bit of subtlety that makes something different is just a huge deal to catching fish or not catching fish. Don't get me wrong, the S-wave's like a freaking great bait, I love throwing it, but hard bait to hook fish on. I'm fortunate enough to live in Lake of the Pines, so I get to experiment around with a lot of different baits. The S-wave, I've literally seen them, and it comes up and they look like they just kiss the bait. They don't eat it. And you're fishing a lot of times, you'll feel a tick, and you're like, was that a fish? And then being that I live in Lake of the Pines and I can actually see these fish and I know what they're doing, they're just coming up and they're just nosing it and stuff. And you'll miss so many fish and they won't commit to it. You can play around and get it to turn around and you get fish to commit to it a little bit better. But throwing these big wave jointed baits are awesome at Clearlake 7-8 months out of the year. I mean, they're really, really good. And the bigger, the better. I don't like throwing these in tournaments because fish come on peg. It's just one of those things, you want to throw it fun fishing and stuff like that, but when you hook an 8-pounder and it comes up, spits the bait out, and that happens more than 2 times in a tournament, it's kind of heartbreaking. So I always try to find something else I can catch them on, other than swim baits. As much as I like throwing swim baits, I don't throw them that much in tournaments anymore. I kind of gave up on them. These right here are my favorite. This is my favorite bait ever made right here. It's a Bass Pro Shop lipless crankbaits XPS. I've caught more fish on this bait in the last 3 years than I have all other baits combined total. I throw this bait almost 11 months out of the year. I throw this bait. This is the best shallow running lipless crankbait they make. This is a LV. This is a deep running lipless crankbait. It's 3/4 ounces. I believe it's like 3/8 or half or something like that. The reason I like this bait so much, and I've had the opportunity to play around with so many different lipless crankbaits on the market. I've literally thrown just about every lipless crankbait I ever could buy in the store or find. And this one, for some reason, just works the best. You can get away with putting these big size 2 gummies on it, and it doesn't kill the vibration even a little bit. I mean, you can throw it out and put no hooks on it versus having these big hooks on it, and you can't tell the difference. It doesn't kill the vibration on the bait. And it's such a compact bait that when it comes to like hooking big 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounders, the bigger the fish is, the harder it is to hook on a lipless crankbait. And the reason being is these big 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounders will come up and literally choke the whole bait. And then you're pulling to set the hook. And those fish don't let it go. They're holding on to it. They're holding on to it as hard as they can. And as soon as they open their mouth, the bait comes vibrating out. So the bigger hooks that you have on it, the better chance you have of sticking that fish. If I could put, even bigger hooks on this thing, I would. I'm thinking about this year even playing around and somehow like putting a hook on top with epoxy or something like that. I mean, we're at Clearlake throwing this because we're yo-yoing this deep. This is how we caught most of our fish at Clearlake on that LV. you know, we caught fish on swim baits, caught fish on HUDs, caught fish on the osprey, caught fish on the rig, but consistently throughout the day, it was lipless crankbait. The final day we had 36 pounds, it was every fish in our live well but one came on this bait right here. It was actually white colored because it was a little overcast and stuff. We're throwing this in the tournament. I started noticing on the final day there a lot of them were hooked on the outside of the mouth and stuff. I switched over to white bait and they just started freaking choking. What's that?
What color is that?
This is, you know, I'm not real too good about different colors and variations.
Ghost blue, I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, ghost blue.
Yeah, and then, you know, we're throwing like crawdad patterns and stuff, but we're on a big school hitch. So they're feeding, I mean, we're catching fish with hitch down their throat. We're fishing in the outside areas around where all the hitch were. And that was the key for us, you know, pulling into these areas. I don't know if you guys
By the
remember.
creek, where the creek come in?
It was Adobe, yeah, Adobe Creek. We spent about 75% of the tournament. We spent the whole final day there. There was a lot of boats coming in and out of there both days. I really didn't want to fish there in the tournament because there's just so many boats, and it feels like salmon fishing when I was a kid, where you shoulder to shoulder with guys arguing and shit. I don't like fishing like that. If that's how tournament fishing was, I wouldn't fish tournaments. But you know, that's where the fish were. We had to go there. So.
How about line? What kind of line?
Well, that's the thing. Okay. So I throw lipless crankbaits like a ton. I mean, it's my favorite bait to throw, and I've gone through so many different rods and so many different lipless crankbaits that I found the perfect lipless crankbait, which this is better than the Strike King, you know, what Kevin Van Dam throws. In my opinion, the reason it's better is because it's actually smaller and it still vibrates a ton. Kevin Van Dam's bait's a little bit bigger, which is actually less hook and more bait. You want less bait, more hook, and that's key. I mean, catching the percentages I fish out of Lake of the Pines when I'm throwing this bait, I'm like 95%, you know, catch rate if the fish eats it. At Clearlake though, I wasn't 95% with this, and you can't put on an LV, you can't put two huge red gummies on it. I put one huge red gummy on the front, and then I put a 2X owner on the back, which I believe is like a size 6, which is pretty much the stock hook that comes with the bait. It's just a little bit beefier, so it doesn't bend out as easy. Yeah, so this is for, you know, yo-yo and deep. And I actually just figured out this whole yo-yo and lipless crankbait thing last year, so I'm really excited about exploring it a little bit more. Where was I getting with that? Oh, okay.
You're talking about the line, yeah.
Yeah, so in the tournament, you know, the first 2 days of the tournament, I was throwing 7.6 Loomis rod, which is my lipless crankbait rod. That's all I use it for, is just throwing lipless crankbaits. And as far as all the different rods I've experimented with, it has the highest hookup ratio. And I freaking love the rod. But on the final day, I'm having these huge, giant fish eat this bait, and I know they're giants because I'm yo-yoing it, and I can feel the tick, and I reel down and set the hook, and it's just dead weight for like 2 or 3 seconds until they open up their mouth and the bait comes out. So I'm thinking, it happened like 2 or 3 times before I like completely just changed. I was throwing 10-pound fluorocarbon, which was I always throw with lipless crankbaits. I ended up switching over to this rod, which is a deep cranking rod. It's an I-rod, 7'11" crankbait rod. And with a 7-to-1 Daiwa Zillion with 15-pound P-line fluorocarbon. And the reason I switched to this rod and this reel and this setup, with the 15-pound fluorocarbon has even less stretch than 10-pound fluorocarbon. And it also gives me the mental ability to know I can swing as hard as I freaking possibly can without worrying about breaking the line. And with a 7'11" rod, it's even that much more leverage than a 6 or a 7.6 cranking rod with even more bend. I mean, this thing, if it wasn't so skinny, is almost like a flipping stick. I mean, it just has a nice parabolic bend, which is good for when you do hook the fish, that they don't come unbuttoned when they come out of the water and shake their head. But yeah, switching over to this, I didn't miss any more fish. I think I stuck another one that was like 7.5, and we're literally calling, you know, 6-pounders all day. It was by far the funnest day of fishing I've ever had in my entire life. And to do it on the final day of the tournament was just that much better. But yeah, I definitely I'm looking forward to this year experimenting around with this lipless crankbait and yo-yoing it. I don't know if you guys yo-yo lipless crankbaits up there in Clearlake, but you better figure it out because it's freaking awesome. It's really something special.
They go over your yo-yo technique. Dave was curious.
Okay. The first 2 days of the tournament was really clear out and little wind and no wind all day. And in the morning we could get away with ripping it off the bottom pretty aggressively, and we're just basically throwing it out as far as you possibly can throw this thing. reeling it in, letting it hit the bottom, and just ripping it off. Sometimes in practice, I was dragging it across the bottom for like 3 or 4 feet, and then just popping it up and ripping it off the bottom. That's how they wanted it in practice. On the first 2 days of the tournament, it was a pretty significant hard rip off the bottom. On the 3rd day of the tournament, in the morning, it was a pretty significant hard rip off the bottom, and then around 10 or 11 o'clock, that bite kind of started dying. That's when I ended up, I think I switched colors around then, and the bites I was getting were literally, I was twitching it off the bottom like a jig.
Win me one of these guys.
The bait wasn't probably coming up more than 6 inches to a foot, and just shimmying once or twice and then falling back down. And it was just real short hops, like just barely moving that bait off the bottom, and that's how the fish wanted it that day. So it changed throughout the tournament, it changed through practice. It wasn't just consistently ripping it off the bottom. Everything changed, but you know, it worked out good. I can't complain. You know, fishing this club and seeing the core group of guys here at this club is really cool. I've learned more in fishing this club than I have anywhere else. Fishing with Joe Everett, I think, you know, when we won the boat last year at the Delta, his information that he gave me a long time ago that I freaking, right up in the brain, I never forget anything that he says when it comes to fishing. That he says, if the bite's ever tough on the Delta, fish the river fish. You remember telling me that? Yeah, that was a long time ago, but I remember that. And the bite was tough that year in the fall when we fished Delta. We stuck on the river and we ended up winning the tournament. So just, you know, little things like that, fishing with different guys, fishing, getting information from different people, always fishing with different guys, because there could be somebody that just started fishing like a week ago, and you can learn something from them, because somebody that comes into tournament fishing or just into fishing in general with such an open mind isn't set to the, you know, the conformities of, you know, what we think we're supposed to do to go out and fish tournaments. So you're always learning stuff, fishing with different people, and that's what's cool about the club. Even having different guys rotate in and out and stuff like that, it's just, it's cool. I mean, I learned a ton fishing in this club. I mean, I didn't even know what drop shot was until I fished with Joe. My first tour, I didn't even know what a drop shot was. I just grew up pond fishing, so. But anyway, that's about it. You guys have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask me.
When you were yo-yoing, were you letting it go back and hit the bottom?
Yeah, just
No short hop?
every time, yeah, stay in contact with the bottom.
All right.
What kind of depth were you in?
Where we caught all our big fish was in that 8 to 11 foot range. The areas we were fishing were outside of the creek, and what it was is there was a whole bunch of hitch in the creek. I mean, I didn't actually go up there and look at them. The second day of the tournament, my buddy told me that somebody else said there was a huge school of hitch up there. I knew there was hitch around because if you're ever fishing in or around hitch, you'll feel them nick your line. It feels like a bite sometimes, you know. When you first start fishing and you get those hitch around your line, it almost feels like a bite. But I could feel those periodically throughout all 3 days of the tournament. And about like every half hour, 45 minutes, I feel one nick my line. The areas we were fishing were actually outside of where everybody else was fishing, and on day 1 we had some brush down there, and that's literally what I mean. There was anywhere from 15 boats out there, and on the first day, when we pulled up, we were like the only ones catching fish. I mean, we saw maybe 1 or 2 fish caught in the 2 hours that were there, just pounding on them. We caught like 15 fish right there. On day 2, I ended up going there, dropped a marker buoy, and then dropped another marker buoy out to the other side of the room, and stayed within those 2 marker buoys and caught everything I could off that brush out there. In the morning, the fish would be scattered, so you can kind of catch them around the brush. It would be like in the brush, but once I stayed there long enough, I could I had a really good line on the brush. Like I knew exactly where to cast, you know, right to where the brush was. So every time I could cast, I could, you know, reel it in through the brush. I even tied on like a shallow run or a medium diving crankbait on day 2, and just first cast, you know, I got it down and just deflected it off the brush, and it was like a 5-pounder. I mean, they're in there, and they go through little feeding frenzies throughout the day. Usually, if you catch one, you catch 2 or 3 more, then they cool off. Then on the final day, I got to explore around that place. We went to our brush first thing in the morning, probably caught 27, 28 pounds. And then after the bite cooled off, we're like, oh, let's go explore around. There's not a million boats out here anymore. We'll give this area like an hour to cool off, which is really all you needed out there. You let it cool off for an hour, you'll whack on again. And then we went to the other side of the point, and I'm throwing, this bait, and I reel down, and I've been pre-fishing out there for 4 days. I hadn't reeled in any grass except dead monkey grass. I throw out and I reel in and I rip it off the bottom, and I pull in this like 6-7 inch piece of like vibrant green grass. And I immediately just reach down the boat, throw the marker buoy out. We parked there, stuck a 9, stuck a 7 something, stuck another 7 something, stuck a bunch more big fish and had them come off. Here comes day 2, leaders. Pull right up shallow. I said, dude, don't throw that out here anymore. We just pulled up next, like not next to him, but up towards him, and picked up the big swim baits again, and waited for him to leave. And then as soon as they left, we turned around and just started firing on them again. Guarded that spot as best we could until there was about an hour and a half to 2 hours left, and we kind of just went exploring some more, and ended up calling out one more fish. So it's just a 7+ pounder. But when my buddy stuck that 9, I didn't think we had it won. I thought there was a good chance we could win, but then I think I caught that other one that was pretty close to 8. That was like at 2 o'clock, and I was like, dude, we got a shot. But it was close. The guys that were in first at 25-32 on the final day, they weighed in 30 pounds. So I mean, I wasn't too comfortable up there until they actually called off what their weight was, and it kind of hit them. So, but yeah. Any other questions?
Good job.
Thank you. I'll just throw this in a raffle like this.